All right, so we've talked about the defensive coordinator search for Oklahoma quite a bit now, and we've talked about Jim Knowles a couple times. And in a recent interview, Jim Knowles said something pretty interesting about his name being linked to the Oklahoma defensive coordinator job. And I think it's something we got to talk about, something to discuss, because when you read between the lines and you start to speculate kind of what's going on, maybe you believe that Jim Knowles could be the next defensive coordinator at Oklahoma. So we're going to discuss it. As always, make sure you guys join the discussion. Jump in the comments below. If you guys are new to the channel, wipe your feet, hit that like, hit the subscribe button. I would love for you guys to be a part of the community. And for the 65% of you guys that continue to watch the channel, continue to come back but aren't subscribed, please consider subbing. Try to get to 15,000. Would love to have you guys be a part of it. And for the assholes that are in the chat that always want to consistently talk about, how I'm not an insider because just because I talk to players or I have sources doesn't make me an insider. You guys can just leave, right? I react to news. I give you guys news that I'm getting. I don't need your negativity in chat. Nobody does. So you can just go ahead and leave. We're going to start banning people from the chat at this point. We're just not going to deal with that. So, respect on both sides, please. That's what we want. But Jim Knowles was asked about, and of course, this would have been in the national championship pressers, right? Because they have pressers before these bowl games, before the national championship. Jim Knowles was asked about the Oklahoma job rumors for the defensive coordinator. And he had one line, and it's pretty interesting. He said, just trying to beat Notre Dame. And this is intriguing for a couple reasons. The first reason is he didn't refute the rumors, right? He did not squash the rumors of being linked to the Oklahoma defensive coordinator job. That's the first interesting rumor. The second thing here is you're starting to hear some rumors and speed pickup on Ryan Day potentially going to the NFL. Now, whether or not you believe Ryan Day will actually make that jump, if Ryan Day was to actually go to the NFL, the odds that Jim Knowles stays at Ohio State, I feel like, would become less, right? I feel like those odds would decrease. But by saying I'm just trying to beat Notre Dame, not trying to, debunk the rumors or anything like that, it tells you that there's potentially something there. Now, regardless whether any of the reporting is right, whether it's you hear people saying that Jim Knowles reached out to Oklahoma or Oklahoma reached out to Jim Knowles' agent, right? Regardless of what those rumors are, Jim Knowles being linked to the defensive coordinator job at Oklahoma, it's obviously something we need to pay attention to. And if it happens, and I think there's a chance it can, because we know what Oklahoma was willing to pay for an offensive coordinator in like Dan Mullen or somebody. Who's to say they wouldn't do the same thing for a guy like Jim Knowles on the defensive side of the ball who would pretty much be able to help Brent Venables be 100% hands-off? Because Jim Knowles has had one of the most elite defenses in college football since all the way back in his years at Duke in 2010. Like, I think for a lot of people forget, when you talk to defensive minds in college football, you would always talk about whoever's at Iowa. You would always talk about Brent Venables. One of the names a lot of people forget is Jim Knowles. And this past season at Ohio State, he ranked number 1 in team defense, allowing 251.1 yards and just 12.2 points. And his time at Oklahoma State with lesser talent, I believe that year, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody in the chat, I believe he had a top 10 defense at Oklahoma State. And Oklahoma fans know that defense all too well because, well, you lost to Bedlam in his last year at Oklahoma State. He was able to, regardless how we feel about pass interference calls, keep Caleb Williams from doing something special and putting the ball in the end zone to one of those talented wide receivers. Now, the other intriguing aspect is if Jim Knowles comes to Oklahoma, does he bring anybody from Ohio State to Oklahoma? And I think this is an intriguing conversation because there are several guys that are a part of the Ohio State squad that maybe haven't been bona fide starters yet, mainly because they're young or whatever it looks like. And Oklahoma was heavily involved in their recruitments. Obviously, I think the one everybody's going to turn their attention to is Peyton Pierce, the 4-star linebacker. He came from Lovejoy High School out of Lucas, Texas. He was a top 200 player in the entire country. That was one where we all believed it was going to be Oklahoma. And then he took this one lone visit to Ohio State, and it flipped right over its heads. A guy like, a lot of people are going to forget this name, 5-star defensive lineman, edge rusher, Edric Houston out of Beaufort, Georgia. You guys remember, he came to Oklahoma, spent a ton of time with Todd Bates and Miguel Chavis in the video room, right? Oklahoma was actually in that recruitment at the end of it. That's a guy that you would potentially look at, say, if he's not getting the time at Ohio State, would he want to come to Oklahoma? I also go back to the 2023 class, and I look at an interior defensive lineman like Caden McDonald out of Swanee, Georgia, 6'3", 310 pounds. He was a top 140 player in the entire country, right? So you look at some of these guys, and maybe there's other dudes that are there, whether they were transfers or just other guys that would want to follow Jim Knowles. And I know Peyton Pierce didn't go to Ohio State for Jim Knowles, but those are all names that if Jim Knowles came to Oklahoma, as an Oklahoma fan, as somebody that just likes to cover Oklahoma for fun, those are names that I would watch to potentially look at transferring to Oklahoma maybe in the spring transfer portal cycle. And I'm not saying they would go out there and get a guy like Caleb Downs, because I just don't think Oklahoma would pay for a guy like that. Obviously you would take him if you wanted to come here, but you don't need a guy like that. Your safety room is plenty good enough. But I do think you get Jim Knowles, you could potentially pull a couple of prospects off the Ohio State squad to come to Norman. So the Jim Knowles to Oklahoma talk, it's very real. I don't think it's not true. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. And then I think there's a lot of people just thinking it can't happen because it's a big name and it's the Oklahoma Sooners, right? I think there's just a lot of people that are negative on the program that will tell you, like, they essentially would rather be wrong about him coming here than being right about, him not coming. But they would rather err on the side of caution. And so I think regardless, you can't really win in these conversations because you're going to have the people that are just steadfast. This will never happen. Oklahoma can't make it happen, which I don't agree with. Like the donors, the boosters, Joe Castiglione, they all just had to live through another 6-win season. I think a lot of people forget that. The donors, Joe Castiglione, this staff, they just had to live through another 6-win season here at Oklahoma. I think people are ready to pony up out of the barn with the cash, literally and figuratively, and make sure Oklahoma not only has the best squad, but the best coaching staff possible to go out there and win in the SEC. Because you look at the 6 wins that Oklahoma had, you could pull 3 losses last year, where if Oklahoma scored 25 points on offense with the defense that they had, they probably are a 9-win team. Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Missouri. You score 25 points in those games, you win those games. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So for Oklahoma fans, you had a good defense. Getting a guy like Jim Knowles would not only maintain the defense where it was at last year, but it would improve the defense. Meaning you could be a top 10 defense, maybe even a top 5 defense here at Oklahoma, which means you're probably winning at least 6 games. You have the same offensive product, you're winning probably at least 6 games. Ben Arbuckle's an upgraded offensive coordinator. John Mateer is blowing people's minds right now in the early testing phases. If Oklahoma's offense could go out there and score 25, 30 points a game, they might win 9 games next year, maybe even 10, which is crazy to think after a 6-win season. And that's not what I'm predicting yet. I will do my predictions closer to the season because I just think early predictions are kind of stupid. But if you guys want them, maybe I'll give them to you. But that's kind of what my thought process is here. I think Jim Knowles is a home run hire, helps Brent Venables out. Obviously, there's connections here. And to be honest, guys, maybe Jim Knowles is thinking for the future. If Oklahoma State decides to move off Mike Gundy, Oklahoma State is familiar with Jim Knowles. And wouldn't they like to get a defensive-minded head coach out there and pair him with a good offensive coordinator? And maybe, just maybe, Oklahoma State would be able to dominate the Big 12 at that time. Maybe that's a couple years down the line. But if Jim Knowles is already here in Oklahoma, I think it's easier to make that move. So I want to hear from y'all. Join the discussion. Jump in the comments below. Give me your thoughts. And if you guys have not already, make sure you guys hit that like and hit that subscribe button.